Imagine a crime scene so meticulously staged that every detective on the case believes they know exactly what happened. The evidence points in one clear direction. The motive is obvious. The suspect is identified. Case closed, right? But what if everything investigators believed was a carefully constructed lie? What if the real truth was so shocking that it would force them to question every assumption they'd ever made? Today, we're diving into one of the most twisted criminal cases in modern history, where nothing was as it seemed, and the truth was far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. On a cold February morning in 1991, authorities in Franklin County, Ohio received a frantic call. A house fire had consumed a small home on the outskirts of town, and when firefighters finally controlled the flames, they discovered something horrifying. Inside the charred remains of the structure was a body burned beyond recognition. The victim was identified through dental records as 41-year-old Barbara Kendhammer, a beloved wife and mother who had seemingly died in a tragic accident. But this was no accident, and Barbara Kendhammer wasn't the victim. In fact, she didn't even exist. What investigators initially dismissed as a house fire with one casualty would eventually unravel into something far more sinister. The story actually begins not in Ohio, but decades earlier in a small town in Wisconsin, where a man named Stephen Avery, no relation to the more famous Wisconsin case, had been living what appeared to be an ordinary life. Avery was a long-haul truck driver, a devoted father of 3, and by all accounts, a pillar of his community. But behind closed doors, Stephen Avery was harboring a dark secret that would eventually lead to one of the most elaborate murder plots investigators had ever encountered. The real victim wasn't discovered until forensic investigators began piecing together the remains from the fire. Advanced DNA analysis, which was still relatively new in the early 90s, revealed that the body wasn't Barbara Kendhammer at all. It was a woman named Lisa McVeigh, a 43-year-old drifter who had been reported missing from a nearby state 3 months earlier. Lisa had struggled with addiction and had been living on the margins of society, making her the perfect target for someone looking to commit the perfect crime. Stephen Avery had befriended Lisa at a truck stop, gained her trust, and then murdered her in cold blood. But the murder itself wasn't what made this case extraordinary. It was what came next that would completely rewrite the investigative playbook. After killing Lisa McVeigh, Avery didn't panic or try to flee. Instead, he executed a plan so methodical and disturbing that it would take investigators years to fully understand its scope. He placed Lisa's body in his own home, set it on fire, and then reported his wife Barbara as the victim. He filed a missing persons report claiming his wife had died in the blaze while he was away on a trucking route. He even attended a memorial service and cried genuine tears in front of family and friends. The deception worked perfectly at first. Insurance companies paid out on Barbara's life insurance policy. Friends and family mourned her loss. Stephen played the role of the grieving widower with Oscar-worthy performance. Meanwhile, the real Barbara Kendhammer was alive and well, living under a completely new identity in a different state. She and Stephen had planned the entire scheme together. The motive, money, freedom, and the opportunity to start fresh without the complications of divorce or custody battles. What ultimately unraveled their perfect crime wasn't brilliant detective work or a crucial piece of overlooked evidence. It was something far more mundane. Barbara, now living as Sarah Mitchell in Arizona, made a simple mistake. She used her real social security number when applying for a job at a local grocery store. A routine background check flagged the discrepancy. Someone who was supposed to be dead was suddenly very much alive and paying taxes under a new name. When federal investigators began digging deeper, the entire house of cards came tumbling down. The investigation that followed revealed just how extensive the conspiracy had been. Stephen and Barbara had spent over 2 years planning every detail. They had researched how to stage a fire that would destroy enough evidence to make identification difficult. They had studied missing persons cases to find the right victim, someone whose disappearance wouldn't trigger an immediate massive search. They had even consulted with a corrupt insurance agent who helped them understand how to maximize their payout while avoiding red flags. The level of premeditation was chilling. What made this case truly groundbreaking for law enforcement was how it exposed critical vulnerabilities in the system. Before the Avery Kendhammer case, as it came to be known in forensic circles, investigators rarely considered the possibility that a supposed victim might actually be alive and complicit in staging their own death. The case forced a complete reevaluation of how authorities approach certain types of crimes. It led to improved protocols for identity verification, better coordination between insurance fraud investigators and homicide detectives, and more rigorous standards for declaring someone deceased without absolute confirmation. The trial was a media sensation. Both Stephen Avery and Barbara Kenhammer were charged with first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including Lisa McVeigh's DNA, financial records showing the insurance payouts, and testimony from the couple's accomplice, the insurance agent, who agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. The defense attempted to argue that Barbara had been coerced by her abusive husband, but phone records and witness testimony revealed that she had been an enthusiastic and active participant in every stage of the plot. In 1994, both were convicted. Stephen Avery was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Barbara received a slightly lesser sentence of 40 years due to her cooperation in the later stages of the investigation. Lisa McVeigh's family, who had spent months wondering what happened to their loved one, finally got some measure of closure, though the pain of her senseless murder would never fully heal. The Avery Kenhammer case remains a cautionary tale studied in law enforcement academies across the country. It teaches investigators never to accept the obvious answer without rigorous verification. It demonstrates how criminals who plan meticulously can exploit gaps in the system. And most importantly, it reminds us that the human capacity for deception, when combined with careful planning and a willingness to cross moral boundaries, can create scenarios that seem impossible until they're staring you right in the face. This case changed everything. It rewrote the rules. And it proved that sometimes the most dangerous criminals aren't the impulsive ones who act in the heat of moment. They're the patient ones who plan for years, who study the system, who exploit our assumptions about how the world works. The ones who understand that the best place to hide isn't in the shadows, but in plain sight, behind a carefully constructed lie that everyone wants to believe. If this story captivated you as much as it did me, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're bringing you more incredible true crime cases that challenge everything you thought you knew. Drop a like if you want to see more deep dives into cases that rewrote the investigative playbook. And let me know in the comments, what other notorious cases would you like us to cover? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we uncover another truth that's stranger than fiction.